We talking about practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Welcome to another After Practice podcast with myself, Lake Lewis. I appreciate you joining me and checking out what I have to say about the Washington Commanders before we get into a lot of the storylines that we have to go over, and it's not good. Before we get into that, you can always follow me on social media, on Twitter at Lake Lewis, and then on Instagram and Facebook, which seems to be the old people's social media platform. You can find me on there at Lake Lewis Jr. And then, of course, you can find my work on sportsjourney.com, and that's actually where this show is going to be posting, where you want to watch it. If you want to subscribe to an audio form, you can go to any major podcast carrier, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it. The podcast is on there, and then of course it's on YouTube as well. And remember, you can also check out some of my morning work, because I'm now a morning anchor for ABC News, television in West Virginia. That's right, but I still cover this team, of course. So I was there Sunday. You were there. If you weren't there, you were watching it, and you saw just an abysmal performance. And after a while, you have to start asking the tough questions. We have to start pressing. We have to start making coaches feel accountable. We have to start making players feel accountable. And everyone turns it on us in the media and makes it look like we're piling on. Listen, let me make sure that I make this very clear to whoever's watching this or listening to this. I was born in Washington, D.C. I remember the heyday. I remember vividly the heyday. It was Super Bowl or bust. And you guys, if you're old enough to remember, you probably have to be 35 or older to remember this, okay? That was the good times. That was when the franchise was at its highest point. And now it's rock bottom. It truly is. And I think the fans who remember the highs, they've accepted these as the lows. But they want to see some change. They want to see some real constructive change. And they're not seeing it. It seems like time after time, Dan Snyder has trotted out a new coach. And I'm going to say it, and it might ruffle some feathers. A new has-been coach who's been around for a long time and wasn't winning when they came to Washington. Ron Rivera is a good person. He's brought a lot of respected, credibility, if you want to say that, to this organization, and that's great. But as far as coaching, if you look at Ron Rivera's background, yes, he took the Carolina Panthers to the Super Bowl. They were 15-1. They lost in that Super Bowl. Cam Newton that year was the league MVP. Outside of that year, he's had 2 other winning seasons as a head coach. I don't care what the scenarios were. I don't care what the, issues were that may have kept him from winning in Carolina. But the bottom line is, when he was hired here, people thought that this team was inheriting a Hall of Fame head coach, and he's not that. He's a people person. He's a players coach, if you want to call it that. But as far as X's and O's, I haven't seen anything. And he's gone out and hired people that I definitely haven't seen it from. And just to make this whole statement even more revealing, your head coach for the Washington Commanders was a linebacker in the NFL. His defensive coordinator was a linebacker in the NFL. And for this team, the worst position group on this football team is what? Linebacker. It's the same problem. And then on top of that, what's the second worst unit on this team? Defense. So I have a problem with that. If you're a defensive-minded coach, then you would think your defense would be better. And by the way, can't say that they haven't given you the toys to make your defense good, because you have a bunch of first-rounders out there running around looking like they don't know what they're doing. Those aren't the players that we saw in college that enabled them to be drafted in the first round. Those aren't those players. Maybe one, John Allen. Montez Sweat. That's not Montez Sweat that I saw in Mississippi that originally was at Michigan State. Daron Payne. That's not the Daron Payne I saw tearing it up in the national championship game for Alabama. That's not those guys. Chase Young, injured. had a great rookie year, defensive rookie of the year. But last year, that wasn't Chase Young that I saw at Ohio State, that we saw at DeMatha. That's not the same guy. So my question is, are they the same players with the same talent? Or are they not any good? Well, I'd like to think that they are the same players that have tremendous talent. I like to think that they're not being coached up properly. They're not being put in positions to make plays. They're not being in position to be able to use their natural God-given abilities and attributes. We're not seeing that. You're making guys cover linebackers are being asked to cover running backs out the backfield. Same linebacker, and I'm going to say it, Jamin Davis. You drafted him in the first round to be a middle linebacker, for God's sakes. That was a failure. So you move him to the outside. And now it's almost like you're bailing on him. Like maybe he's not what you thought. Well, maybe you need to coach him up better. Maybe you need to coach this team better. Maybe you need to stop coming to the podium and acting like everything is okay. Everything's fine. We figured it out. We've talked about it. You still have a losing record. You won your division at 7-9, still a losing record when the rest of your division basically was a mash unit. That's what that was. Let's call it like it is. So what do? That first year, you win your division 7-9, and guess what you inherited? You inherited a winner's schedule for the next season, and you proved that you were no winner. You finished 7-9 again. So the rule of thumb, and most people thought, you go out and you get yourself a quarterback that could get you 2-3 more wins this year. Most people were thinking this team's going to have 10 wins, okay? This team doesn't look like right now the way they're playing that they can get to 6 wins. And that's not me piling on. Like I've said before, I am from Washington, D.C. I want nothing more than to have my childhood team that I think is a privilege and an honor to be able to be a professional in media, be able to cover a team that I once cheered for. I don't have the fandom anymore. I don't. I have a job to do, and I try to do it unbiased. And that's why I'm sitting here taking them to town right now. It sucks to have to do that. I want to be able to cover a winner. I want to be able to walk into a restaurant and people say, man, I know you. You cover the Redskins. You cover the Washington football team. You cover the Commanders. Dinner's on us. Now, it's hard for us as journalists, as media to cover the team. People look at us like we have a stench to us because we're associated with it. The fans are getting laughed at, scoffed at. You can't fill a stadium. You have the other team's opposing fans come in the building and take over a stadium. You should be ashamed of yourself as a fan. Well, how can you support a product that has lied to you, that has deceived you, that has led you astray? How can you support that? I don't blame a fan for feeling like they want to give up on this team. And don't tell me that they're not true fans, because I know a lot of people that have supported this nonsense for a long time, and they've spent a lot of money on season tickets. They've spent a lot of money on the $15 beers, probably had 2 or 3 of them after the product they watched on Sunday. Think about all of that. You're bringing your family to that stadium, that game, sitting in that traffic, paying for those tickets, paying for that high-priced food, high-priced merchandise. There's a lot to be upset about if you're a fan. And I'm gonna ride with you on this. This isn't to turn your back on something that you love, because you want to see a winner. We all do. But at the end of the day, the organization has not done right by its fans. And they're trying, and they say they are, to try to turn the corner and do things. Well, we need to see change. We need to see it in the media. You as a fan needs to see change. Jack Del Rio, it's time to go. It's just flat out what it is. Call me unprofessional, whatever you want to call it. I'm a grown man. I can take it. But I'm telling you right now, that defense has done nothing but regress from the first year. It's regressed. And they've gone out and gotten more players, more talent to come into this defense, and those players have regressed. William Jackson does not look like the William Jackson that we saw press covering people in Cincinnati. He looks like Jackson William, if that's what you want to call him. I don't know who he is. Kendall Fuller, that doesn't look like Kendall Fuller that was having success in Washington, and then they traded him in the Alex Smith trade. He goes to Kansas City, gets the Super Bowl, looked good, and he comes back. That doesn't look like Kendall Fuller. So am I supposed to believe, once again, that all these first rounders on defense, on that line, and different things here and there, that these guys don't have talent? Of course I know they have talent. Of course they have talent. They're not being coached up properly. They're not being put in positions to make plays. They look like a bunch of robots out on the field. They look like guys that don't know what they're doing. They look like guys that don't trust the guy next to them. And that's what we see. If a player comes out and says that's not true, we have each other's back. Okay, if you do, show us on the field. Because on the field, what I see is face mask in the dirt from opposing teams coming in and abusing and bullying them. That's not what's supposed to happen with the talent that I do believe really is in the building. Look at the offensive side of the ball. Things just jump out to me. You have a strong arm quarterback now who's deaking and dunking because his offensive line in front of him is just horrific. Those are the type of things that fans scratch their head. Again, I tweeted out during the game, as I watched this team get just basically blown up over the last 2 games, I'm looking at a Detroit team put up 4 sacks on you in the first half, and 3 by a rookie, okay? I'm seeing Philadelphia drop you for 6 last week, first half. I mean, seriously. These are the type of things that you scratch your head and you try to tell me that you let Trent Williams go. I don't give a rat's what the issues were. You make it work. You have a Hall of Fame left tackle in your building. You make it work. If you got to pay him more, if you got to drop to your knees and literally bow at his feet, make him feel better. You need to keep that talent in the building. You had Brandon Scherff. When Brandon Scherff saw how Trent Williams was treated, no way he wanted to stay. And I know that verbatim, okay? Let's just put it out there. People see things and how people are treated. When they saw how Morgan Moses was released after being told 2 weeks before that we want to build around you and Brandon, and then you're unceremoniously released. Can't even come to the building to get your stuff. I know these things. Some of this stuff is not cool, and it's starting to reap itself. You reap what you sow, and this organization is literally reaping what they've sowed for a long time. It's what do they call it? The roosters are coming home to crow. And right now, it just has to be a gut check. It has to be look in the mirror and tell yourself you're not good. You're not getting it done across the board. This is a organization across the board not getting it done. Are there some good people in the building? Absolutely, and I know they mean well. But unfortunately, the people in power who are running the team, who are making decisions on personnel, who are coaching X's and O's, aren't getting it done. And they haven't been getting it done for some time. Something needs to change. And what the first thing that can show and signal you mean business, promote Chris Harris or someone, the defensive coordinator. Give him a chance. I know the secondary is not necessarily lights out right now either, but just get a young guy a chance. Maybe he sees something on the back end that could change the front end. Who knows? But all I know is Jack Del Rio's not getting it done. And if you want to play the loyalty card, both of you are going to be on the road together. That's what's going to happen. At the end of the day, love all my boys out there, love all my friends, but if you're costing me my job, we're going to be friends outside of the playing field because I need to have production on the field. I need my coaching staff to be productive. If I'm on offense and I'm Scott Turner and I see that the Philadelphia Eagles are basically living in my backfield all over my quarterback, I'm going to adjust my game plan to make the quarterback get rid of the ball quicker, even though we know that's not Carson Wentz's strength. He does hold on to the football and gamble. Well, perhaps a little bit of a running game would kind of alleviate the pressure off of him and make Philadelphia's defense a little honest. We all know this. We don't have to be the smartest people in the room. We don't have to be head coaches to know that's football 101. And the problem that I had with the Ron Rivera hire from day one was this. When you hire an old school coach, you're going to get an old school mentality of it's my way and this is all I know. There's no flexibility with old school coaches because they come from that school where they were ingrained. You just keep plugging away, plugging away. But then you see these young coaches now who, by the way, there was like 4 or 5 of them around the league right now who were on the coaching staff in Washington at some point. You have Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco doing well. You have Zach Taylor. You have Matt LaFleur. You have Sean McVay. You have Kevin O'Connell. These are guys that were in the building for Washington, okay? And they all got away. I said when Ron Rivera was hired, the first thing he should have done was told Kevin O'Connell, I still want you to be here to be our offensive coordinator, because Kevin O'Connell had some things cooking a little bit when he was able to call plays under Bill Callahan, okay? But we all know old school coaches bring old school people in with them that they're familiar with, that they know, and that's what Ron Rivera's done, and it's hard for him to part ways because there's no reason that Jack Del Rio's still coaching that defense. Not after what we've seen for the last 2 seasons, and it's getting worse. It's one thing to say you can see a fix coming, but it's another thing to see with your own eyes. Anybody can see this. Each game looks worse. They regress each game. Something has to give. So, again, this wasn't to take anybody to task or take them to town or whatever you want to call them, undress them, whatever you want to call them. But we got to start speaking in truths here, folks. The Washington football team's not a good football team. They're not. And if they want to be a good football team, they can't come out and beat the Dallas Cowboys and then think, okay, we got everything going. No, you got to beat the Cowboys. You got to come back and beat the Tennessee Titans. You got to keep it going. The problem is it's wishful thinking to think that they can even, beat the Dallas Cowboys. It's wishful thinking to even think that. After what I saw the Cowboys do against the Giants and how the Cowboys defense is flying around, Micah Parsons, I got to do that. I mean, that was a heck of a performance last night against a Giants offense that's, it's up and down. Saquon Barkley, by the way, You see these guys and you think to yourself, why can't Washington have shiny toys like that? What is it? Terry McLaurin, very good player. I'm glad he got his money, glad he got his bag. He deserves it. A great kid, great ambassador for the Washington Commanders. He's their face, in my opinion. I'll say this. When you're talking about talent evaluation, did Washington evaluate Terry McLaurin to be Terry McLaurin? No, they didn't. They drafted Terry McLaurin because Terry McLaurin was a special teams ace in college at Ohio State, and he did have some potential. But if they try to take claim that they knew he was going to be a star, that's not true, simply not true. So you got to give Terry McLaurin all the credit in the world for that. But if you ask me right now on Washington's roster, currently constructed as far as 11 starters on offense, 11 starters on defense, how many of those players would be guaranteed starters for other NFL teams? I'm going to give you 5 seconds, let you think about it, okay? I'll give you 5 seconds. I come up with 2. Terry McLaurin would start for half the league and be a number 1. The other half, he'd be a number 2. Some teams, he might even be a number 3. And that's the truth. That's not knocking Terry. Great player. But when you talk about lights out player that you can pluck and he'll go anywhere else and start and he'll be good, I'm probably going to put my eggs in the basket of John Allen. I would say John Allen starts on most defensive lines, if not all of them, okay? And I also think there's a punter, Tress Way, who would be the punter for at least 80% of the teams in the NFL. When you have to start talking about a punter as one of your best players, you got problems, folks. You know that you have problems. And something has to give. The way this team is being put together, the way this team is being constructed, it's hit or miss. I mean, you can go back to the Darius Geises of the world. You have all these players, frontline players, getting drafted, and they don't do anything. Regardless if it's on the field or off the field, you gotta have home runs when you're not a good football team. You can't miss. It appears like Jahan Dotson, by the way, he literally has proven, in my opinion, and I always knew the kid was great, I think he's going to be a frontline starter for this team for a long time, opposite Terry McLaurin. It appears that Curtis Samuel, had he not been injured last year, would have been a great free agent signing for this team. So they have done a couple things okay. It seemed like Phidarian Mathis was showing, lots of potential before he had obviously a season-ending injury in the first game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there were a lot of things there, a lot of things that you can say, okay, they did this right. But then there are the misses. Jamin Davis right now is a miss, and he was a first-round draft pick. And then you compound that by not drafting linebackers in this year's draft. You compound that when you see teams like Philadelphia take Nakobe Dean. I mean, that's inexcusable. You cannot miss on your draft picks. You cannot say that you're trying to groom guys down the road. You don't have time for that. You're not the Buccaneers. You're not the Patriots. You're not the Kansas City Chiefs. You're not teams that are traditionally in the playoffs with great quarterbacks. Green Bay, for God's sakes, they don't win in the playoffs, but they get there every year because of Aaron Rodgers. You don't have the luxury to draft a guy to develop him 3 years down the road. You got to make sure your picks are able to come in and play and contribute immediately. Folks, it's sad to say this, but right now, the way I see this thing going, I don't see it getting better anytime soon until some changes are made. Let me know your thoughts. You can always write me on Twitter. You can always, DM me. I'm accessible. I like to think that I'm one of the guys that you can come up to and talk to. Even if you see me at the stadium, come up, talk to me. Let's talk it out. I respect all the fans' opinions because you do have an opinion and you have rightful opinions. So let's talk this thing out, man, and see how this thing is going to turn itself around. I wish I had the answers, but right now it's gut check time. It's code red. It's code red going into week 4 for the Washington football team. For the Washington Commanders. You go to Dallas and you lose, which looks realistic at this point right now, you're 1-3, okay? And that's not going to look good with 2 division losses. Not going to look good at all. So Washington has to find a way to gut out an important victory in Dallas to keep the division close to them and not have this thing start to turn over and be out of control after the first quarter of the season. So I'll be back. We'll talk about this stuff a little bit more as always. But once again, folks, definitely appreciate you taking time to listen to my little vent. Have a great remaining part of your day with whatever you're doing, and I appreciate you.